Sorry about that. I'm having a little bit of issues with the laptop getting started. It's running very, very slow, but we should be live. I'm wanting to get that up and checked before I start checking my stream and things like that. But yeah, sorry, the computer's being very, very slow for the time being. Still waiting on my Twitch to load. It's taking a long time. But once everything loads, we should be okay. We are live, it's just taking a bit for things to load on my end. As long as I can make sure that my microphone works, we'll be okay. So we do seem to be okay. And we are live in practice, even though things on my personal Twitch don't necessarily seem to be wanting to load too well. But we are live with free practice. We'll see if I can get my personal Twitch to load all right. Don't know why everything wants to go so slow, but the good thing is we don't rely on the laptop to do the streaming, just the overlays, and once we've got those, then we are okay from here to the end. Kyalami, we got a long one for you tonight. A lot of racing, about as much racing as I've ever had with TRC in one night, aside from a 6-hour event. But we've got 2 full hours of racing, 2 30-minute GT4 races, followed by a 1-hour GT3 race. It's going to be one single qualifying for all of it. As of right now, Elizondo with Mercedes in a good position to at least qualify well, should this be the time brought to the table in qualifying. I'm just going to have to close my browser, that's just not one to work. Actually, Vasquez, Elizondo's teammate, goes slightly faster at 151.147, the time to beat. The Mercedes Mercedes team definitely posing to be a force to be reckoned with, at least in GT4. We are going to have some mixed class tonight. Not mixed class all on the track at once, but we are going to have racing in both GT3 and GT4, which adds another element of practice to the drivers' practice regimen this week. It's not going to be so cut and dry simple as practicing one car for the week and being done. You've got to practice both a GT3 and a GT4. Kyalami, a very tricky technical track. It can get tight in a lot of places, especially up through the penultimate turn. Pretty much all of Sector 3, very, very tight. Not much room for two cars to go through there side by side, but they are going to try to do it tonight. I can absolutely guarantee you that. Up into turn 1 goes Vasquez, way too deep, going to invalidate that lap and pull it into the pit lane. Mikey in the Aston Martin, one of the Team Lime Aston Martins. Team Lime being the TRC admin team. But all the Team Lime drivers in Aston Martin, McLaren, they all have at least seemed to be fairly well distributed near the top. Definitely showing that they've got the skills to bring home results regardless of the car. And hoping for good result tonight. Everybody's looking to beat the Mercedes. As of right now, those top two Mercedes being Vasquez and Elizondo, they have a few teammates sprinkled it down throughout the rest of the grid. But an absolutely dominant force are the two top Mercedes of Elizondo and Vasquez. Two drivers very quick in their own right, and I can tell you they are absolutely hunting for a championship in this series. Both series champions themselves, multiple-time series champions, and I think probably the most TRC championships between the two of them. Say between Elizondo and Vasquez, they probably share the majority of TRC championships. Going to be very difficult for the rest of the field to try and bring an equalizer to them, as I think we are getting some teammate running. That is number 23 of Young and the Mercedes behind. Very close between Vasquez and Elizondo as they continue to swap spots on the leaderboard, back and forth and back and forth. Winter in the Porsche, up there in the standings. Douglas, teammate in the Porsche. Some time to be made, and it is still just practice, so not the end of the world there. But Winter out driving the teammate of Douglas, who was one of the top Porsches previously. Wagner as well, Douglas and Wagner, both championship caliber. Wagner a multi-time TRC series champion. Douglas, I believe, yet to take home a series, but absolute monumental talent there in Douglas's hands. Very young driver as well, so a lot of room to grow. If he's already this quick, as old as he is, you'd think he can only get faster with more and more experience. Definitely a driver in terms of development that you would expect to outdrive the rest of the field in due time. Definitely faster than a lot of the old guys like Horner here in the McLaren. Horner very, very quick. Never count out any of the Team Lime drivers anywhere in the running, no matter where they are. Horner, a driver that can absolutely bring the pain. Further on in the race, a lot of consistency from Horner, and consistency is going to be the #1 factor for all of these drivers tonight, and all of these drivers throughout this entire season. Only a 7-round season, 3 rounds of each of the classes, essentially 6 rounds of the main season before we head to a 1-hour multi-class final round. But a lot of racing to go between now and then, as Horner, stepping out a little bit too wide, unsettles the car, and I think that is actually going to allow Vasquez to slip on by. Circuit located in South Africa, and an absolute favorite for many drivers. Many drivers in many series, they can't get enough of Kyalami, and it can make for some great racing. There does tend to be some drivers that are absolutely on it here, and some drivers who are maybe a little bit out of the pace. That does not mean that it is going to be a bad time. With all of these drivers in these different manufacturers, some drivers not necessarily going to be in their favorite car, and GT4 is a big equalizer, as well as we saw in the previous series that ran here at Kyalami, the 246W series. We were here in the, I believe we were here in the M2 TCX car. But putting everybody in a different car, throwing them in a different seat, that different seat may not be quite as comfortable. Some drivers may be finding themselves a bit more comfortable in a car than they expected to be. Vasquez with a 50.8, and the track not quite developed to its optimum condition yet. See what kind of lap times we can look at. Once we get that track started to develop, should be more developed in qualifying. It's going to be a short 15-minute qualifier, and that is actually going to set the grid for the entire session tonight in both the GT4 and the GT3 classes. As of right now, it's looking hard to beat Vasquez and Elizondo. Out of the final corner and across the start-finish line. Is it an improvement for Vasquez? It actually is. Finds at least another 10th, or around a 10th. Drops it down from a 0.8 to a 0.7. A good lap for Vasquez there, as we are about to get kicked over to qualifying Miller in the Camaro. The only manufacturer that is just staying with nationality as Miller gets too much of the curb and goes over the lid. Going for a wild ride there. And that is actually going to bring an end to the session. A lot of the curb caught there. That was a bit interesting. Quite the time to hop on over to Miller's cam, but in free practice, all eyes on Vasquez. And yeah, chat, if you are there, somebody please get a clip of that flip there. That would be definitely a clippable moment. As we don't typically have too many drivers flip their cars, but it does happen. And I'd say if you are listening to the stream, hit return to garage so we get rid of the yellow flags. Faster we get rid of the yellow flags, faster we get kicked over to qualifying. That is typically one of the reasons for the long queue times in between. Oh, and that was actually qualifying. I thought that was just free practice, and it was actually qualifying, I believe. So it was Vasquez up on top. Vasquez, Elizondo, Bird, Mikey. It's Mercedes 1-2, and then Aston Martin 3-4. Aston Martin's lock out the second row. So I was a bit late. I didn't realize that we were actually there in qualifying. I thought we had just done one big free practice session, but I guess I was wrong. Well, anyway, here we are about to go. Green flag here at Kyalami in the second round of the TRC Brands Baddies series. And maybe if I realized that it was qualifying, I would have focused on the session a bit more. I thought we were still just in free practice. But anyway, let's take a look at our qualifying. Vasquez in P1, Elizondo P2, Bird P3, Mikey P4, Winter P5, Horner P6, Norman P7, Boiling P8, Wagner P9, Jennings P10, Douglas P11, Mott P12, Craters P13, Breakfast P14, Drain P15, Rowan P16, Merkel P17, Young P18, Fernandez P19, Atwell P20, Harrell P21, Wilson P22, Bow P23, Harvey P24, Trotman Grant P25, Miller P26, Short P27, Granados P28, Franklin P29, Renzelman, a newcomer tonight, P30, Hurd returning after their first race in round 1, Bow 2, I believe, and Caligari in P32. So that is our grid tonight. We are about to get rolling. Vasquez and Elizondo once again back at the top of the leaderboard. And we are about to get rolling in race 1 of 3 tonight. And instead of 3 20-minute races like we usually would have with this format, we're actually going to have 2 30-minute races and a 1-hour GT3 race, all with the same qualifying order. Engines are about to get fired as we have hit that 30-second mark, and we're about to go ahead and get rolling. Quickly getting after it today. And let's see what we are gonna have after we come a full lap around the track. And Vasquez will get us moving off the line. And we are officially rolling for the first time tonight, ready to get started. Formation lap here in these GT4 cars. Warming up those tires is not necessarily as crucial as it would be in a GT3, but still crucial. Same with the brakes. Brakes probably more important than the tires. A bit more street-based, these GT4s, than the GT3s. They're still race cars. They're still very, very expensive, and they're still only a shell of their road-going companions, but they are still a bit more road-oriented, closer to their original concept than a GT3, and about as close as you're going to get to a road car with the upper echelon of motorsport until you get down into the TCX and TCR, TC classes. It's also where you start to throw some front-wheel drive into there, and those are pretty much actually going to be street cars for the most part. We are going to have a couple drivers starting from the pit lane. Jennings and Mott will be starting from the pit lane. Short will be starting from the pit lane as well in the Audi, and I believe Short making a first-time appearance in this series. Not a first-time TRC appearance, but just a first-time appearance with this Manufacturers' Cup. There is going to be a bit of weaving, trying to get those tires warmed up, trying to warm up the brakes as much as possible. By the time we get to the start-finish line, Vasquez going very, very wide. I think cooking a little bit too hot into the hairpin. For the most part, the track pretty tame all the way until we get to the Sector 3 timing line, where we then come down the mine shaft into Crocodiles. Turns 13 and 14. A wide yet tight right-hander, followed by a very narrowing and quick succession mild left-hander. And then the hardest corner on the track, the right-hand kink of Cheetah. That is where we saw Miller go end over end, essentially doing a barrel roll coming off of that curb at high speed, and that sausage curb on the inside definitely can send you over, more likely to have one of those blowovers in a GT4 than you are a GT3. Same thing with the TCR cars. We actually saw a couple rolls in the TC cars and the M2s. But we roll towards the start-finish line, and we are about to take the green flag any moment now. Wait for those lights to go green, and there they go. Green, green, green. We are racing in round 2 of the TRC Brands Baddies series, and we are going 5 wide up into turn 1. Quickly get it consolidated as we check back with the midfield. The Audi of Boiling. I believe Boiling making a first-time appearance tonight, and Boiling getting involved in an incident there with the number 99 of Wagner, and also making contact with the Mercedes of Breakfast. As there is some argy-bargy 4 positions. Nobody wanted to give it up, but at some point somebody had to. And back on with our leader, Vasquez. Up in the front, and Vasquez very, very quick in the front, able to run on his own for quite a long time. Very, very consistent as the teammate of Elizondo, and they could do a bit of a repeat that we saw at Imola, where the lagging teammate plays some defense, chokes up the drivers behind, which there is a bit of controversy about teams doing that in NASCAR at Martinsville this past weekend. Playoff implications. I can tell you right now, trying to hold up the traffic behind is definitely going to have some championship implications, depending on the effectiveness that Elizondo and Vasquez will be able to do that with. Down back through the field as everyone goes wide to try and avoid the car on the inside, but it's single file through the kink of Cheetah. You're not really going to be able to fit 2 cars too wide through that kink, but they will try and they will fail. If you are going to go too wide through there, you're going to be way off the pace, having to be a lot slower than you would like to be. up through the big turn one, which is very, very reminiscent of a mini Coda. I like to call Kyalami mini Coda, even though many people may not necessarily agree with that. Vasquez getting a lot of the curb. Wonder if that was staying within the track limit. Track limit violations, drive-through penalties, not something that you're going to be wanting to deal with in these 30-minute races. There should be no entry into the pit lane. There are no required stops. If you do have to make an emergency stop or serve a penalty, you are likely going to be forfeiting your race at that point. Better luck next time from there. This top four has started to break free. Douglas in the Porsche, just like at Imola, taking the fastest lap. Again, we'll see if Vasquez and Elizondo are able to reply to that. Douglas desperately trying to grab onto the slipstream of the Aston Martins up ahead as the two McLaren, or the two Mercedes and the two Aston Martins both pulling away. The Porsche not quite as quick in a straight line, desperately trying to hold on. The Porsche a very, very good handling car. And I think a bit of defense from Vasquez and Elizondo as Mikey makes contact with the rear of Vasquez. Vasquez trying to rejoin the circuit is going to concede one position to, I believe that's going to be the 103 of Bird. A bit of argy-bargy elbows out. Vasquez now got some work to do, but has Horner in the McLaren now on the inside with Douglas right behind. Mikey relegated all the way back to P6, I believe. And now Mikey with some work to do will actually go ahead and go on board with Mikey, looking forward at that battle as Horner looks to take a position away from Vasquez in the Mercedes. Vasquez forced wide and Douglas is actually going to follow suit, but I don't think Douglas able to fully get that move pulled off. Is not, has to slot in behind, and Vasquez now once again trying to apply the pressure and move back forward, reclaim that spot for the time being. Bird able to try and work on Elizondo, who now holds the fastest lap and the lead. And that gap growing. Mercedes outside of slipstream of that Aston Martin. Vasquez still ahead of Douglas. There was a bit of a bump. Vasquez got moved out of the way. No harm, no foul really, as both Mikey and Vasquez both lost time. Mikey ended up losing more time than Vasquez, and Vasquez just has a bit of work to do, but still plenty of race to run. 25 minutes left. We're only 5 minutes into it. And that gap behind has started to form around the number 7. This is kind of where the mid-pack ends. 7 of Bo in the BMW GT4. And if we go back to the 333 of Winter leading that mid-pack, that is where that split is starting to develop up ahead. Breakfast and Harrell. Harrell had the inside, and the Camaro 2 wheels up in the air coming over the curb there at Cheetah. That we did see Miller go over there, and could be a product of very soft, or of a very hard suspension, very stiff suspension. Number 68 of Boiling into the pit lane. Elizondo still holding the lead. Vasquez applying pressure to Horner, trying to take that final spot on the podium back. And maybe do some work on catching up to Bird in the Aston Martin up ahead. Elizondo continuing to grow his gap. Was 2.2 on the previous lap, 2.5 at this timing line on this lap. And Vasquez in that Mercedes trying to set up the move on Horner. Let's go on board with Vasquez as he's trying to make this move stick. Horner on the curb, on the grass. Vasquez nearly loses it, going too wide on the outside. Now has to shuffle back in line and have all of the work that he had done get completely undone. Heading into the hairpin. Vasquez will try to get a better drive into and out of the hairpin. Is within slipstream of the McLaren up ahead. Not quite going to be close enough. The McLaren does seem to be quick, or at least Horner got a better exit of the hairpin. Horner going slightly defensive into turn one of the Crocodiles, though. Through turn 2 and into the kink of Cheetah. Very, very tricky corner here. Still about neck and neck. We'll see if Vasquez is able to get a better drive out of the final corner. Maybe some more rotation out of this Mercedes. He gets a good run, but I don't know if it's going to be enough heading into turn 1. I think the McLaren a bit better on the acceleration up the hill. See if Vasquez is able to send it into turn 1. I don't think he's going to be close enough, but he's going to be getting a lot closer, and they are battling for position behind between Douglas and Mikey. Douglas still ahead of Mikey. And Douglas once again desperately trying to hold on to the slipstream of those leaders. Going a bit further back, we do have a multi-car battle for position. Harvey in the Camaro in battle with the number 23 Mercedes of Young and the 333 Porsche of Winter up ahead, and also Wilson in that Aston Martin a part of this fight. This is a four-way battle for position. Harvey made it past the Mercedes of Young, now trying to work on the Porsche. The Camaro quick in a straight line with that big American V8. A lot of weight to move, doesn't handle quite as nice as the more nimble Aston Martin and Porsche. The Mercedes in a bit of the same boat as the Camaro, but likely not going to be as heavy. Harvey going for a look into the hairpin, going to go a little bit deep. Is that going to open the door for Young? Running out into the grass is definitely going to open the door for Young. I don't know if Young will be able to get past, though. Tries to get the nose, but it's not going to be enough. Harvey holds on to the position, but is going to lose time to Winter up ahead in the Porsche. Three-way battle for position here between Craters, Harrell, and Breakfast. Breakfast in that Mercedes trying to hold on to these two fighting up ahead. Craters nearly lost it coming off of the curb of Cheetah. That sausage curb causing a lot of problems for these GT4s. And now a drag race across the line and up the hill. Once again, the McLaren seeming to have a little bit better acceleration. Kind of neck and neck. The McLaren will pull ahead and actually will hold the inside into turn 1. We'll see if Harrell able to set up the cutback, and I think Craters has gone a bit too deep. Is Craters going to be able to hold on to this position though? And no, actually going to lose both positions as Breakfast is actually going to follow suit of the Camaro. Actually, I don't think he was quite able to get it done there, and no, Breakfast has to slot behind the McLaren. Four-way battle brewing up ahead as Vasquez has found a way past Horner. And Horner, I think, now going to be on the back foot with Douglas and Mikey both trying to find a way past the McLaren, who I believe is having a little bit of an issue just trying to regain grasp of the situation. We do have an incident further back at turns 3 and 4. And that is going to be the McLaren of Franklin and the BMW of Bo involved in that incident. Both had to allow the field to go past before they rejoin the track. Vasquez clear of Horner, but a battle brewing behind between the Aston Martin and Porsche. Mikey versus Douglas. Douglas, very nimble car, but just does not have the power down the straights. And very, very wide out of the final corner. It's going to be a drag race between the Aston Martin and the Porsche. I think the Aston Martin wins that one hand over fist. But we'll see. Douglas very, very defensive, pushing Mikey to the inside until the last moment, then takes the racing line. Mikey is forced to follow. It's going to make things a bit harder for him, but Mikey kind of had a fender on Douglas there. Douglas now drops back a position. Obviously not too happy with that move, showing a flash of the headlights, but now Douglas with more work to do to try and hold on to that pack up ahead. So far, the tracks that these cars have been racing on not too kind to the Porsche, as the Porsche just does not seem to have the straight line speed to really contend with the rest of the field. Very, very nimble, very racy, with just a hard time trying to compete. Three-way battle behind between the Aston Martin of Norman, the McLaren of Drain, and the Porsche of Wagner. These three nose to tail coming through the S's. Up the hill, the McLaren getting a bit unsettled, so kind of the same issue that we saw with Horner. And Norman wants to go for the dive bomb into the hairpin, but it's going to be too little too late, or too much too late. Goes straight on and through and is knocked out of this fight for the time being. Loses 2 positions. The position to the number 99 of Wagner and the position to the number 1 Camaro of Harrell. All in this time, Elizondo just able to extend the lead. Bird and the Aston Martin cruising in second, but who is that behind? That is going to be the Mercedes of Vasquez. Dropped down a few positions, but showing that superior pace and has gained 0.4 of a second between the Sector 2 and the Sector 2 timing line and the start-finish line, the Sector 3 timing line. And a bit wide through turn 1 goes the Aston Martin, and I think Vasquez definitely looking for an overtake here. Reclaim the front row for Mercedes. Mercedes are definitely looking dominant in this series so far. Graders and Breakfast continuing their fight. I think everyone just trying to hold on to the slipstream of the other, not let anyone really get away. Hard to regain that time and get back within that slipstream range. Vasquez now very, very close behind Bird, inching closer and closer to that overtaking territory. Bit of a slide through the S's though, into the hairpin. Vasquez trying to set up a bit wider, a bit later than the Aston Martin, get the better drive out of the corner. Seems to be working so far. Bird now having to think about going defensive. I don't think that Vasquez is going to be close enough into the Crocodiles. That move is definitely looking to be set up at turn 1 on this next lap. Vasquez taking the wider, quicker exit line. Still applying the pressure to the Aston Martin of Bird, but it's not necessarily dire at this time, and Vasquez, I believe, showing a pretty clear pace advantage over Bird. We'll see how Bird is able to defend here, though. Don't think Vasquez is going to be close enough to Bird to overtake here into turn 1, but it's going to get very interesting on this next lap. Vasquez feints to the inside. Horner and Mikey in a similar battle in a similar gap. As Mikey now looks to chase down Vasquez once again. Follow Vasquez up the order. Vasquez trying to put a car between the two of them, and that car would be the number 103 Aston Martin of Bird. Vasquez once again showing the move, trying to apply the pressure, get the reaction, but it is not going to come from Bird just yet. And a bit wide for Vasquez, but once again gets a better run with that wider line later exit down through the S's. Bird once again trying to pull away from Vasquez, and actually seems to be doing so this time. I think that gap may have grown. That came across the Sector 2, or the Sector 1 timing line at the start of Sector 2. Gap right at 1/4 of a second. I think the gap stabilizing to what it was on the previous lap, if not a touch closer. Actually, no, it has actually grown. Check back on this battle. Multiple three-way fights with all sorts of different manufacturers. McLaren versus Porsche versus Camaro. Aston Martin versus Mercedes. McLaren versus Aston Martin. Got all sorts of different battles all through the field. Drain with the Porsche of Wagner all over his rear. Wagner trying to gain some positions for the Porsche team, desperately in need of some points. Wagner now essentially pushing Drain down Start finish straight. Bird still ahead of Vasquez, up ahead, Drain. Going defensive against Wagner as Wagner goes for the late switchback move. They go side by side through turn 1. Very, very hard to make it stick around the outside. They slam doors together as they are elbows out. Drain did not want to give that position back, but Drain now forced to go the long way around the outside. Is he going to be able to make it stick, though? He hasn't fully conceded the position until now. Wagner has completely gotten that position away, but look who is closing up behind. That is the McLaren of Craters and the Mercedes of Breakfast. We may have a 5-way or a 6-way, 6-manufacturer fight here in a very short amount of time. As Wagner ahead of Drain, Harrell behind with the Aston Martin of Norman, Craters and the McLaren inching closer. It's actually not going to be a 6-way manufacturer, but it would be 5 different manufacturers for 6 different positions. Drain now forced to go defensive into the hairpin. That's going to choke the field up behind. They are side by side. That's not very quick. That is going to help out the number 99 Porsche of Wagner to pull away. And now these 3 fighting for this position into the Crocodiles. The McLaren going defensive, trying to force the Camaro the long way around the outside. The Camaro going for the long way around the outside. Harrell not going to make it stick, though, and that opens the door for the Aston Martin. The Aston Martin backing out before they get to the kink. But a lot of hard fighting here. Harrell actually going a bit too deep into the braking zone, having to avoid making contact with the Aston Martin or the McLaren of Drain. And now Drain once again able to solidify the position ahead. Norman in the Aston Martin looking for the move on the Camaro, but it's not going to happen there. I'll be back onto this fight for P2. Vasquez once again closed up to the Aston Martin of Bird. Through Sector 1, the Mercedes does seem to be faster. Through Sector 2, Vasquez does lose some time. And we are 2/3 of the way through this race. We'll see if Vasquez is going to be able to get this move done at the hairpin or maybe on the next lap. Vasquez seeming to have a better run through the S's this time. Vasquez holding on to the gap, definitely much closer than he had been on laps prior. And this is for big points for the Mercedes team. Elizondo in the lead with a commanding lead, 7.7 seconds ahead. As long as he does not make a mistake, that is pretty much going to be a win confirmed for Mercedes here in race number 1. Through turn 13 of the Crocodiles, through 14, then the kink of 15 Cheetah. Vasquez all the way to the extent of the track limit, just barely keeping those tires on the tarmac and out of the sand. Vasquez once again trying to get a better run than Bird down the start-finish straight, but the gap is stable. No dice yet for Vasquez. Wagner in the Porsche pulling away. Drain still under pressure from the Camaro of Harrell, the top scoring Camaro so far. And we are going to see all of the manufacturers' cars in action tonight, as we do have another race of GT4, then a 1-hour GT3 race. And through turn 1, Drain and Harrell. Drain went the long way around the outside, Harrell unable to get it done on the inside. They will continue to lap in their respective positions. Merkel into the pit lane with damage from P20. That is not good for the Camaro boys. Wilson in the Aston Martin chasing down Young in the Mercedes. Wilson trying to get a nose into the final left-hander before the S's. We'll just have to follow behind. Harrell and Drain, it is getting spicy as they run up the hill towards the hairpin. Harrell trying to set up the old switcheroo at the hairpin. He's Got the first part of it done, but just is not able to get the acceleration out of the corner to make it stick. Back on with this fight for P2. Bird still defending against the Mercedes of Aston Martin, now having to go slightly defensive. And a big slide from Vasquez trying to get on the power right up against the rear bumper of the Aston Martin. And this fight can continue to go on, but at some point something is going to break. Bird now forced to go defensive. Bird feeling that Vasquez is close enough to make the move. That is going to give Vasquez the better line. But Bird still ahead by enough of a margin. That's not going to be what he wants, though, as they're going to be side by side coming through the very, very long right-hander. Left-hander coming up. Vasquez going to try and get it to hold around the outside, which will give Vasquez the inside at the next left-hander. And that's exactly what it's going to do. As long as Vasquez can keep it on track, is going to be able to secure the position. Now Vasquez has to hold on to the position. Bird likely not going to want to give it up that easily. The slight mistake from Bird opened the door for Vasquez, and Vasquez, a very opportunistic driver, took that opportunity, that one opportunity that he was going to get, and will try and run away with it from here. But Vasquez not mistake immune. See if Vasquez is able to hold on to it, or if he gives it back to Bird before we start this next lap. See if Bird able to be close enough to fight this position back. He is all over the rear bumper of Vasquez and actually going to kind of get a nose on Vasquez, but not in the place that you want to. It's got to be a perfect exit of the final corner for Bird if he can get a better drive through there than Vasquez, and he looks like he's actually going to do so. We could have this move back on for Bird retaking this position. Mikey has made it past Horner, so it is back to a Mercedes 1-2 and an Aston Martin 2-3. Mercedes locking out the front row, Aston Martin locking out the second row. About 5.5 minutes left of this race. Bird trying to fight this position back, and he definitely has the pace left in that car to do so. Just depends on whether or not he can hold on to the Mercedes of Vasquez. Fight between Harrell and Norman, as they have made it past the McLaren. Now it is Aston Martin versus Camaro. Aston Martin versus Chevy. I think the Chevy going to win out there, as Norman made a mistake going too wide at turn 4. And now Harrell able to drive off into the sunset. A long way to go to Wagner up ahead. Should leave the two behind to fight for themselves. Up into the hairpin. Bird still trying to hold on to this gap. Running down the hill towards the Crocodiles. Bird starting to drop back, still within the slipstream range. But I don't know that Bird will be able to fight this position back, as Vasquez just continues to grow that gap ever so slightly. Drain and Norman now in a fight. Norman actually having a very poor exit with that mistake that allowed Harrell to go through, and Norman lost a position to Drain. And once again, Craters and Breakfast creeping into the picture. And who is that in the Camaro behind? I think that may actually be the... Is not the Camaro of Harvey. I think that is actually the Camaro of Merkel. Came into the pit lane, is laps down. It's a drag race between the Aston Martin and the McLaren up the hill into turn 1. Craters in the McLaren wanting to either help the teammate or follow through the both of them and get some more points for the McLaren team. But now we are going to have a tight fight from here to the end. As they come into turn 4. It's right now a three-way fight with the potential for a fourth to join in. We also have a fifth should this fight get a little dicey. As of right now, Norman does lead the two McLaren teammates. Bird still trying to hold on to the Mercedes of Vasquez, is holding on. We are going to have 2 more laps here around Kyalami, as our leader Elizondo did not start out in front, but made his way past a teammate. A big run onto that outside curb, or the inside curb there at Cheetah. Don't want to roll the car when you're out driving alone, but out for a nice evening cruise is Elizondo. And we'll have this lap and 1 more to go for race number 1. Bird will try and chase down the Mercedes of Vasquez. Drain and Norman continuing their fight. Norman goes wide though, so does Drain. Is that going to open the door for Craters to go past? I believe Craters would like to go past. But we are going to be all sorts of jumbled up together. As Drain, Craters, Norman, Breakfast, all 4 together as we run up the hill. 5 as you include the Camaro of Merkel, who is not in this fight for position, but at least has a good view of this fight. Drain and Craters, they are racing each other. There is an overall championship. As of right now, it is looking pretty bleak. If you are not in a number 15 Mercedes or a number 777 Mercedes. But we do have GT3s tonight, so we'll see what they are going to be looking like, what their pace is. We have not seen the pace of this field with their respective GT3 counterparts. Drain still ahead of Craters. Points do not change for the team based on where they finish ahead of the other. Norman making another mistake and is now going to drop to the back of this pack. Back behind the Camaro of Merkel. And Wilson finding a way past the Camaro of Miller. Vasquez crossing the start-finish line, leading us to the final lap of this race, and it has just been a cruise for Elizondo since he gained the lead. Drain and Craters maybe doing a bit of damage control, saying, hey, let's not fight so much. One behind the other, still the same amount of points for the team. As of right now, no real reason to risk it. Who is that in the pit lane, though? That is Short in the Audi. And not much Audi representation today, only 2, Boiling and Short. Granted, many drivers not so happy with the performance of the Audi GT4. So far in the first 2 rounds of this championship, it has been Mercedes dominance, unable to be toppled, and it's going to be a Mercedes 1-2, I believe. Close behind, though, is the Aston Martin of Bird and the fellow Aston Martin of Mikey, both scoring some big points for their team. And Horner in the McLaren behind, as Bird allows Mikey by. I think Mikey going for championship points. Bit of team orders there, I believe. Saying, hey, would you let me by? I finished better last week. No. Has Bird run out of fuel? Bird going very, very slowly has conceded another position. And I think Bird is out of fuel. I think Bird has run out, and that is very unfortunate for the Aston Martin team, as they were in a very good point-scoring position, but Bird now dropping like a rock, trying to creep to the finish line. I think he's going to make it there. Elizondo has taken the win. Vasquez took P2. Mikey took P3. It was supposed to be an Aston Martin lockout at the second row. And a bit of a bump there to try and help the teammate out. I think that was what Bird needed, but collected the Camaro of Harrell in that. Not the Camaro of Harrell. I think that was the Camaro of Merkel. Somewhere is the Camaro of Merkel, or no, it wasn't Miller. Where is that extra Camaro at? There it is. He's into the pit lane. So fuel. At least when you get one race in, you know how much fuel you need to finish the next one. Not a very good day for the BMWs. P20 is the best. Not a good day for the Audi team either. It's P27 will be their best. And the number 14 of Rinselman. Bit of damage on that Porsche Cayman GT4. And out of the final corner and across the line will be the final driver to finish tonight in race number 1. Elizondo in P1 with the fastest lap. Vasquez P2, Mikey P3, Horner P4, Douglas P5, Wagner P6, Harrell P7, Drain P8, Craters P9, Breakfast P10, Bird P11, Winter P12, Norman P13, Young P14, Wilson P15, Miller P16, Atwell P17, Jennings P18, Mott P19, Trotman Grant P20, Rowan P21, Granados P22, Bow P23, Renzelman P24, Caligari P25, Merkel P26, Short P27, Franklin P28, Harvey P29, Bird P30, Fernandez P31, and Boiling P32. Well, it's back to Mercedes dominance, and with those two names at the top of the grid, I don't think anybody can be surprised. But we'll have to see if that continues in race number 2. Plenty of things that can happen. As there could be some mistake made dropping one of the Mercedes teammates back behind. But as of right now, they are just absolutely dominant. Oh, and yes, I had kind of forgotten, but if you do order any Thrustmaster equipment, please do so from the Thrustmaster website. And when you do, please use code RETROVEX R3TROVEX. And we're about to get started with race number 2. This is going to be a second 30-minute GT4 race before we transition to a 1-hour GT3 race. Going to be our first impression of the GT3 cars with this field, with the teams and everything, how they are set. Could be a first-time exposure to some of the drivers with that GT3 car in a race setting. And if you like what you see tonight and are on console looking for some sim racing, TRC, a great place to go. Very community-driven, community-oriented, making sure that everybody is able to progress and has a good time racing. Does a lot of very unique events, such as this team-based Manufacturers Cup that we are running tonight. as this will continue on for 5 more weeks after this round tonight. There's 7 rounds total in this championship series. And we will crown both a driver's champion, a single driver's champion, and a manufacturer's champion. All of the manufacturers are on a team together, so you see all the Porsche, all the Mercedes, all the Aston Martin, all the McLaren, they are all teammates together, all ultimately fighting for one goal. And that one goal right now does seem to be to beat Mercedes. A bit reminiscent of a certain letter and number racing series a couple years ago. But anyway, we are about to get started, get rolling for race number 2. If you would like to support the streams, if it is your first time tuning in, I would greatly appreciate it if you would use a Twitch subscription or a Twitch Prime subscription. If you have one, you get a free one with your Amazon Prime subscription. As a morning race here at Kyalami, as we are about to get rolling here yet again. Race 2, another 30-minute GT4 race. Sorry, we don't have a GT3 race. I don't know why I looked at the format wrong. I am all sorts of messed up today. This is just going to be our second and final race tonight, as it will be 2 weeks before we get our first taste of the GT3 cars in this format. I am a bit off my rocker tonight, and I am sorry about that, but we will do our best. So Vasquez up in front. This time we'll try to hold the lead. And remember, Elizondo and Vasquez, they are both racing each other for a driver's championship. Don't want to make it too easy on one another. Both of those drivers have plenty of championship wins between the two of them. We'll see if they are able to hold on to this championship throughout the duration of this season. It's going to be very hard to take it away from them, and I think more so between the two of them, they are not so much fighting for that driver's championship, but more so fighting for the ability to keep it from somebody else. So our second and final race of the night here in GT4. You guys going back watching the VOD are going to be all sorts of confused. I was looking at the event page, which says GT4 races, 2 30-minute rounds, and GT3 races, 1 60-minute round. And I don't know why I was thinking that was our setup for tonight. But anyway, we are lined up 2 by 2, about to get racing again, as the 2 Mercedes lined up 1, 2, locking out the front row, then the 2 Aston Martins locking out the second row. And it seems to have been Mercedes versus Aston Martin here at Kyalami. Mercedes still a dominant force here compared to Imola. We'll see how they end up next week. We'll wait for the lights to turn green. And green they go. Green, green, green. We are racing for the second and final time tonight in the TRC Brands Baddies Championship. And they are all sorts of defensive into turn 1. 2 Mercedes out front able to hold on to their positions nicely, and then the Porsches, as we go 3 wide, Boiling once again involved, collects the 99 of Wagner, also goes back and collects one of the Mercedes. I think that may have been the Mercedes of Young. No, it was not. Collected one of the Mercedes, unsure of which one that was, but multiple drivers involved in that. The 713 of Wilson involved, the number 22 of Fernandez involved in that incident. They make contact again. Not sure of exactly what happened there. I think Crater's involved in that incident as well. Yes, Crater's relegated to the back. As good of a lap as any for that to happen, as they will be able to catch up to the pack easier on lap 1 when the field is more condensed compared to any other time. But Vasquez and Elizondo, I believe, having the faster race pace, and Vasquez allowing Elizondo to move back up into the lead. Vasquez trying to defend against Bird, who is looking for an early move and get that second place position like he held for the majority of race number 1. The 2 Aston Martins running 1 and 2 side the other. Top 2 scorers in class. Mikey goes very, very wide though. And Winter in the 333 Porsche, as there is quite a high concentration of Porsche at the top of the field here at Kyalami. Winter, Douglas, Wagner, Jennings, as Jennings is actually dropping down a position to Harrell. Porsche very, very good at qualifying, but I think just does not have the race pace to really contend with the rest of the field. Better at the handling-oriented circuits, so Kyalami, at least through the handling sections, very, very good for the Porsche platform. But just not really able to pull out the result in the race. Able to get there, but just does not really have the oomph to get that move made and really look forward for those positions. Could be a completely different case in the GT3. Porsche, a strong car in GT3, but just a bit tricky to handle if you don't have much experience driving it. I think we've got a battle between the sister Aston Martins. Bird may be letting Mikey by here at the hairpin. No. Mikey will have to wait for another chance. Horner in the McLaren at the inside of Douglas. Douglas does have some battle scars on the side of that Porsche Cayman GT4. Wagner involved in that incident on lap 1. The Audi's just not having a good time, but for the most part, Wagner doesn't seem to be too affected by that. Merkel making his way past Jennings, who had to go wide, and right behind the Mercedes and the Porsche goes side by side. The Porsche off the curb, able to go the long way around the outside, and that's ultimately going to be the faster way if you're going 2x2 like that. But we have a big incident behind the number 181 Camaro of Harvey involved in that, the 7 of Bo. We've got all sorts of cars involved in this incident. The number 14 of Renzelman, who all is involved in that incident. Bo, Harvey, Renzelman, 3 cars involved in that at least. Wonder if Short was involved in that, but that was a lot of yellow flags. Number 32 of Douglas goes off, I think pushing a bit too hard on his own. Hopping on with the number 3 of Drain, fighting against the number 99 Porsche of Wagner. And Mikey, the sister Aston Martin's having a bit of a battle amongst themselves. Drain following behind the teammate of Horner. Craters, the teammate who was in this position previously, involved in that lap 1 incident, down a few positions, will have a long way to go to work his way back up. Wagner and Harrell side by side, as the Camaro does seem to have a bit better top speed than the Porsche. I think Harrell's going to try and send it up the inside into the Crocodiles. Wagner goes defensive, makes it hard. They are both going to be very, very slow. The Camaro has the inside, but the Porsche will try to get the drive around the outside. And ultimately the Camaro having to concede the position before the kink of the Cheetah. I don't think he'd want to be in that Camaro and hit that curb very hard. We did see Miller flip it in qualifying earlier. The 3, we've got a train of Mercedes, Young, Mott, and Breakfast, P12, P13, and P14 all running together here, scoring at least condensed points for the team. Car number 181. That is going to be the Camaro of Harvey getting that is a 30-second stop and go for speeding in pit lane, and the two McLarens make some issues together. Horner goes for a trip in the grass, a bit of landscaping there as Drain goes around the outside. Two McLarens here not necessarily helping themselves. They haven't lost any positions to each other, but not running at the top pace and not really working forward too much. Camaro of Merkel and P11 trying to chase down the Porsche of Jennings. It's actually a pretty good point scoring race so far for the Camaros. Merkel running the Garage 56 colors on that Camaro Z01 GT4R. Ways back, Miller fighting with Craters and Atwell. Horner and Drain, the two McLarens still racing each other. I think they're both trying to gain some positions up ahead. Actually, no, it's Horner trying to gain on the teammate. What has happened to Drain? Drain dives into the pit lane. And has Drain had a fuel issue? Unsure of exactly what is going on there. You did have someone mention you in the chat as you come into the pit lane, so it may be a bit of a commenter's curse. As the Mercedes still run together, Mott has dropped the two teammates of Breakfast and Young and is now working on the Camaro of Merkel. As all of the Mercedes go wide. Jennings now a bit of a sitting duck as Merkel looks to go past. Merkel will go up the inside of Jennings and assume one position there. Jennings now defensive into turn 6. As Mott will try and go up the inside. Are we going to get a bit of 3 wide here? No. Mott nearly turned the Camaro of Merkel. And just running very, very tight here up into the hairpin. Camera can't decide which of the 4 or 5 cars here within frame it wants to get onto. There is a trio of Mercedes gang stalking the Camaro and Porsche of Merkel and Harrell. And I'd be saying, hey, we got a whole bunch of guys behind us that are not in a team with any of us that are looking to make their way past. Merkel goes wide at the kink. Merkel goes wide, and they set up in a bit of a cruising formation there. Mott held the inside as Breakfast and Young both went to the outside. Could be a lot of good pictures of the team here running all 3 together. Bit of a fight behind between Douglas and Franklin. Everyone else up ahead does seem to be pretty spread out amongst each other. Mott now with some pressure from the teammate as Breakfast wants to go past. We've got a bit of infighting here between the Mercedes crew. Third of the way through this race, and this is not how you're going to gain positions, as now Mott goes back ahead, but it is Young that is actually going to move up a position. Craters slicing and dicing through the field. What has happened to the three? Back out on track. Definitely has some pace, should be able to regain quite a few positions. But I think that may have been a fuel issue. Didn't see any damage, any reason to really come into the pit lane. Bit of contact there between Drain and the BMW of Hurd. But muscling his way past. Again, I think that must have just been a fuel issue. Horner and Harrell. As Horner ahead of Harrell. The McLaren does seem to be quicker than the Chevy Camaro. I believe as we are heading into the evening, track going to cool a bit, but we are still on optimum conditions. The sun is setting. We think we are going to be headlights on here before too long. Majority of the field does have headlights on, but it is not required yet. And Merkel with the Mercedes gang still right up on him behind. That pressure has allowed Jennings in the Porsche to pull away. The three Mercedes trying to catch up. The number 19 of Franklin around at turn 4. And we have got quite the battle up ahead. This is a battle for P16 between Miller, Norman, Craters, and Atwell. Craters, very quick driver, looking to find his way back into the top 10. And Miller ahead of Norman, ahead of Craters, ahead of Atwell. Norman and Craters, both drivers that were further on up the grid. Norman in the Aston Martin throwing up a big cloud of sparks. And Norman a bit later on the brakes than the Camaro of Miller, and they are all grouping up behind. Norman does have what looked to be a run around the outside of Miller into the Crocodiles, but is not going to be able to get it done. Miller now defensive, trying to hold on to this position. Is that going to open the door for anyone to try and get past? They are all queuing up behind the Camaro here. Norman, Craters, and Atwell, all three trying to find a way past. Norman's going to send it into the final corner, nearly making contact, but ultimately did not make contact. Norman is now going to be not in a drag race down the line. The Camaro gets a better exit, higher top speed, and is able to hold on to the position for the time being. May have a bit of a dive bomb into turn 1, though. Norman eyes it, Crater eyes it even deeper. Ultimately, no driver going for it, trying to get a better run out of turn 1, though, as Norman does seem to. And Miller makes a bit of a mistake, but that's actually going to put him on the inside and close off the move. I think a bit too deep into turn 4 as the entire group here goes too deep. Craters now defensive against the Aston Martin of Atwell, but no, Craters is going to have the inside of Norman, and they are fighting door to door. Right behind, they make contact together. It's a synchronized spin as Norman and Craters both go into the wall. That's going to undo a lot of the work that they had just done. Into the hairpin. As no, Mott makes a mistake, goes deep into the hairpin, and that's actually going to allow Young to get a drive past. And actually may allow Douglas to go up the inside of both of them. Douglas trying to regain quite a few positions lost. Apart from his qualifying position. As we are just now halfway through this race. Douglas slicing through the Mercedes teammates. Has made his way past 2, has 1 to go. That is going to be the 555 of Mott. Horner and Harrell fighting here as Horner trying to catch the Porsche of Winter. Now eyes set forward on the Porsche. This battle here between Douglas, Young, Breakfast. Douglas gets it closed off against the 2 of the 3 Mercedes here. Has to catch the 555 of Mott up ahead. And what have we got here at the front of the field? Vasquez has not pulled away from Mikey. Mikey within slipstream range less than a second, around 0.8 of a second. We'll see how that gap changes at the end of the Sector 2 timing zone. Down the hill into the Crocodiles. Gap fell by 0.05 of a second. Actually, no, right around 0.03 of a second. Through the kink of Cheetah. Elizondo not really pulling away a huge lead. Granted, his partner behind has not been in a fight to really slow the competition down. And Mikey is on the front foot, is within the slipstream range. Vasquez trying to kind of break the toe. Vasquez knows the threat is lingering. And Mikey is there to pick up any scraps. Vasquez cannot make any mistakes as Mikey would swallow that second place position right up. But I think we're going to have a fight here between these two very shortly. Horner trying to defend against Harrell, actually on the back foot now, not looking forward towards the Porsche of Winter and going very, very wide. And he's not going to be able to hold on to it. Horner hard into the wall. Will rejoin the track and try to be defensive against the number 99 of Wagner, but it's going to be hard to do. Unsure of exactly how much that damage is going to affect the handling of that car. Back on with this fight for P2. Vasquez still ahead of Mikey, but Mikey is gaining. The laps left in this race are waning. So I believe we are going to be right around 6 or 7 laps left, but Mikey is definitely on a run, has the front foot. Is Mikey going to go for it into the Crocodiles? At least feigned the move. Did not ultimately go for it, but definitely opened up. I'm sorry I switched away. Hop right back on that fight. I didn't know if Horner was going to be able to hold on to that position or not. Didn't know what kind of damage he had. I was thinking that if Horner had a good bit of damage on there, that he was just going to pull to the side and allow Wagner to go through. We can sit here on board with this battle. For the time being, it does seem to be that Horner is able to hold on to the position. I don't know. Wagner has a bit of a run. Again, feigns the move to the inside. Tries to get a reaction out of Horner. The reaction does not come. We'll watch him through turn 1, 2, all the way to turn 4. The Porsche, again, a better handling car. And I think the McLaren is starting to show a little bit of a handling issue in the long term, as we have seen pretty much all of the McLaren drivers make some mistakes really trying to push the track limits in the McLarens, both here and at Imola last week. I will jump back onto this fight for P2 between Vasquez and Mikey. As they come out of the hairpin, we do have that battle between Horner and Wagner just coming through the hairpin now. Horner is, is still ahead there. We'll watch this through to the final corner and then switch back over. Vasquez still with a lot of work to do. Mikey really on the front foot in terms of that pace. For a split second, we'll hop back on between Horner and Wagner. Not going to happen between now and the final corner. Back on with the battle for P2. Vasquez now recognizing the threat, going defensive. And Vasquez now in a bit of the danger zone. Very, very hard to hold on to the position when you have that pressure coming from behind. And Vasquez, again, not immune to mistakes. Now having to go very, very defensive. Bird in the Aston Martin. I think it's just an overall pace of the car difference. Now Vasquez still doing a bit of damage control for the team. Should he lose one position or two, it will still be a win for the team as Elizondo is up ahead. The longer that this battle continues on, the further that Elizondo will be able to pull away with this lead. Back on with the battle between Horner and Wagner coming up into turn 6. Wagner all over the bumper of Horner. While the McLarens may be very, very quick, they do seem to be a bit of a handful to drive, especially around here at Kyalami. Nothing yet in that fight. We'll watch up into the hairpin as Wagner is on the headlights, flashing, trying to get that mistake to come out of Horner. Horner already knows that this car is starting to give him a little bit of trouble, as we have seen a lot of running wide. Bit of a slip, trying to get the power down or going too wide, really plowing through the corner rather than getting the bite that you would want out of the car. Wagner just trying desperately to pull behind. Eventually cruise past number 915 McLaren of Horner. And a cue back here behind Merkel, as Jennings has been passed for position. But I think Jennings is going to put the fight, as they have a drag race down the line. It's actually not Jennings, it's Douglas. Jennings has dropped back a few positions. Douglas versus Merkel here, 1/1000th of a second between them at the line. Douglas will have the inside. Is in P10, looks to move up into P9. Mott in the Mercedes behind in this fight as well, trying to scrape up a few more positions. Back on board with the battle up ahead. Wagner goes very, very wide. He can drive the tires off of the car, trying to really get a bit more performance out of the car than maybe it wants to give you at the time. When in doing so, you overwear the tires. Back up into the fight for P2. Mikey with the Mercedes of Vasquez. They have some traffic that they are slicing through. And the gap between Vasquez and Elizondo has been holding right around 5.5 to 5 3/4 of a second. Mikey is still desperately trying to find a way past the Mercedes of Vasquez. It is getting a bit dire the longer that this race goes on. Hopping on with the fight between Winter and Harrell. Harrell trying to get a top 5 finish for the Camaro, which would be an absolutely monstrous finish, as the 63 BMW goes around and the 333 of Winter, I think, taking a bit of fault for that one and trying to give the position back, but Hurd goes into the pit lane. That's going to make quick work of that fight. Harrell up into P5. Wagner and Horner, it's getting a bit dicey into turn 1. Horner did go defensive, forcing Wagner to try and find a way around the outside. Not going to make it easy for Horner to get this, or for Wagner to get this move done. And again, that plowing through the corner from the McLaren put Horner in this position earlier anyway, and I think that's actually going to concede the position to Wagner. The McLaren does seem to be the quicker car, but just does not have the consistency that the Porsche does. The Porsche, a very, very consistent car, which is going to be good for GT4 points, as they've got 4 cars within the top 12. The highest concentration of cars within the top 12 of any of the manufacturers. Could be just finishing the best average rather than winning all the races. Granted, the Mercedes does have P1, P2, P11, P13, and P14, which is going to be good. All of their top 5 and the top, essentially the top 15. And the Camaro's actually throwing together a good result here. P5, P10, P15, and P16 at the time. We'll hop back on with this absolute crowd of cars behind. Actually, this was behind Jennings. It's now behind Merkel in the Camaro. Merkel, Mott, Jennings, Breakfast, Young, Rowan, and Miller at the very back of this pack. This is essentially a 6-way fight for position. Merkel up at the front. What has happened here? The gap had grown to 1.3, but I think Vasquez has now made a mistake and equalized that gap back down. As they come across the Sector 1 timing line, it's going to be a lot closer. 2.8 tenths of a second between P2 and P3, and there's going to be 2 laps left of this race. This lap and one more, it's going to come down to the wire. The Aston Martins both want to get a position past the Mercedes, and I have a feeling that if it's going to be one pass, it's going to be both passed. Should the Aston Martins be able to get past the Mercedes of Vasquez, deny the second 1-2, as of right now it looks to be a McLaren sweep for the weekend regardless. But it is getting very, very tight up here at the front. We'll hop back on the battles throughout the rest of the field shortly. Want to see if this swap up position comes here yet. It is not going to come there. Wagner has pulled away from Horner. Merkel with Mott right behind. And when the top 3 come across the line, we'll see how the gap looks. If it looks close, we'll have to hop on that fight. It is not close, as actually Mikey gets a poor exit, and Bird is applying the pressure to the teammate. Mikey does not want to concede that position though, wants to continue to push. Merkel and Mott have pulled away from this group a little bit. Merkel leading this trio of Mercedes in the mid-pack. There's contact behind between Rowan and Jennings. Rowan ends up going off the track there in a fight further back behind between Miller and Norman. Raiders in the McLaren with a bit of a rough night. Now a bit of the accordion effect is actually, it's not going to be the final lap of the race. We're going to get one more lap, as this next lap will be the final lap of the race. Elizondo been running an absolute masterclass, which is no unusual feat for the Mercedes driver. Mikey desperately trying to catch up to the Mercedes of Vasquez. Is going to have the rest of this lap and all of next lap to get it done, but there's no more room than that. That is all that Mikey is going to have. Merkel and Mott in a fight here. Mott desperately trying to move up into the top 10. Put 3 Mercedes in the top 10 would be an absolutely amazing point scoring night for the Mercedes. As they come down through the S's, Mott tries to have a look. Looks like he does get a better run, and I think Mott may have this move set up into the hairpin. Merkel sees that, goes defensive, and Mott may be able to set up the old switcheroo, goes a lot deeper into the hairpin. Is not going to be able to get as good of a drive out. Elizondo leads. This is the final lap of this race. Mikey P2, Bird P3. Bird has dropped behind leaves Mikey to fight against Vasquez in the Mercedes. It's got to be everything that Mikey has in that Aston Martin GT4 to pull this move off and get this second place away from Vasquez. Wants to pull away the front row sweep from the Mercedes, but it's going to be very hard to do so. Hurd in that BMW. Traffic up ahead does have blue flags. The Mercedes of Vasquez will try to get past without losing any time. That BMW on the racing line not necessarily going to help too much. Now flashers from both Vasquez and Mikey as it's getting very, very tight. Traffic up ahead not making it easy for Vasquez and Mikey as they are both one behind the other. Now the chess game ensues. How is that traffic there going to open up the move for Mikey? Vasquez forced to go very defensive. Bird makes contact, and Hurd flies off exit stage left. Or I guess exit stage right, one of the two. I wasn't a theater kid. Down into Cheetah. It's going to be all Elizondo for this weekend, going to pull off the sweep, but this race for P2 coming down to the last lap, coming down to the last corner. Is Mikey going to be able to get the run? Is Mikey going to have to send it into the final corner? Vasquez parks it on the inside. Mikey tries to get a run around the outside. It's a drag race to the line, but Mikey is not going to be close enough. Vasquez takes home P2. Mikey will bring home P3. Good point scoring for both teams. Bird P4. Harrell will bring home P5, but what has happened behind, as we did have a car off. Harrell P5. Winter will bring home P6. Wagner will bring home P7. Horner P8. Douglas will bring home P9. Mott looks to bring home P11 as gave the position back to Merkel. Not going to be able to get into the top 10. Breakfast and Young, the three Mercedes, finished 1, 2, 3 compared to each other. Rowan in the Camaro bringing home P15. Norman in a drag race to the line against Miller is going to finish ahead, P16. Miller will bring home P17. Atwell P18. Trotman Grant in the BMW will bring home P19 once he crosses the line. Craters will bring home P20. Bit of an ugly race too for Craters. Did whatever he could, but it just was not enough at the end. Bo will bring home P21. Drain will bring home P22 after having to pit. And once again, I think did not put enough fuel in the car. It's just going to be coasting to the line. Hopefully he will make it. It's going to get close. May be barely moving, may need a push. Just don't touch the brakes. Turn the wheel left and right, left and right, left and right. Try and swim that car. Barely makes it across the line. P21 and Short will bring home P23. Actually, Drain ends up bringing home P22. Elizondo P1, Vasquez P2, Mikey P3. That's your top of the order. It's Mercedes P1, Aston Martin P2, Chevy P3, Porsche P4, McLaren P5. The way the top scorers went there. Long way to go down the order for BMW. Even longer way to go down for an Audi. P23, the best for the Audis. P19, the best for the BMWs. It's looking hard to beat the Mercedes, Aston Martin, and Porsche crew, but Harrell in the Camaro making a bit of a statement for the American manufacturer, the solo American manufacturers team here in this championship. Thank you all for tuning in. I know it was a bit of a wonky stream tonight, but that is okay. It happens. That is going to be an end of our racing tonight. Some great racing from everybody. And it is once again a Mercedes sweep. Hard to deny victory from the duo of Elizondo and Vasquez. In my opinion, the two top drivers in all of TRC teaming up, they are going to be an unbeatable duo. But anyway, that brings an end to the racing tonight. We're going to go ahead and find someone to raid, and then we will sign off for the night. Also remember, if you would like to subscribe to the Twitch channel, I would greatly appreciate it. It helps me a lot and helps keep the overlays and the stream cost-free for me. And also, we need 1 subscriber to the YouTube channel to reach 100 subscribers. If one of you would be so kind to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not, we are just 1 subscriber away. We're going to go ahead and give Elmo a raid. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you all next week. And go give Elmo some love on his stream. If it'll ever go, my laptop has been extremely uncooperative today. I think we're just going to have to not do a raid today. It doesn't seem to want to work, so